If you click this video, you're the MVP, because my first impressions of a thumbnail like this would probably be along the lines of, wow, this idea is dumb, considering the fact that Naruto is already an Uzumaki. But when you stop to truly think about these implications, the changes become more apparent, and that's exactly what this video will be covering. However, before we get into that, I just quickly want to point out that a lot of you guys are not subscribed to the channel who watch the videos on a consistent basis. So if you haven't already, click that red button and the notification bell so you're informed every single day when I post, because I do upload daily, every day at 8 a.m. That said though, if you guys go on to enjoy the video, then like the video for a cookie. Yeah, it helps the video do better in the algorithm. Oh, okay, this intro's long enough. Let's get started.
Hey Ross, sauce it up.
We started perspective with a devious Naruto who had just finished painting the faces of the Hokage monuments, and at this point, he was pulling one of his usual pranks. This is when suddenly, he would get reprimanded by doing so by the Hokage Hiruzen, and he would give him a book telling him that he needs to find another outlet for these outbursts, and while Naruto hates this at first, he would actually grow to accept it, as well as love it. Naruto would find peace in books and feel happy for once. He doesn't feel hated, but actually accepted. And eventually, he would end up asking Hiruzen for more and more books to read. When one day, he's 8 years old, he would come across a book in the library titled Uzumaki History, the Land of the Whirlpools. And he would begin reading all about his family lineage, learning that the Uzumaki clan was a powerful and fierce clan that, was one of the strongest at the time. He would end up reading into the history more and more, and would end up wanting to learn all of these interesting techniques that the Uzumaki clan possessed, such as shielding jutsus, and that the clan was most famous for, and the chakra trains with his mother was actually famous for. They were renowned for having massive amounts of chakra, and that's something that Naruto was excited for, because once his chakra paths open up, he's going to have access to a plethora of chakra-based abilities. One day, Naruto would decide to ask Hiruzen for help in that department, telling him that he wants to know more about his clan and that he wants to learn about his clan's techniques. Hiruzen would look at Naruto and ask why this sudden interest, and Naruto would state that he's been reading up on his clan and he's truly fascinated by it. Hiruzen, understanding this, would hand Naruto a scroll, a basic one at that, and this would start Naruto's role to becoming a seal master, and also learning to somewhat control his chakra. Naruto would spend his first month struggling due to the interference of the Nine Tails, and eventually would scream, "Why is this so hard?" at the top of his lungs. He would fall to the ground in the training grounds and wake up to see Kurama, as well as a strange place that he had never seen before. A sewer-like area with a large gate and an even larger beast behind it. Naruto would look shocked as he would walk closer and closer, and he would hear the fox's voice. It would tell him that he's the reason he can't control his jutsus. And Naruto would be shocked and ask who he is, and learn about Kurama and his status as a Jinchuriki, which would shock the young Naruto. And being a kid and all, Naruto would sit down right next to Kurama and ask him to be his friend, with a hint of fear in his voice, seeing as Kurama is a massive beast. Kurama would growl at Naruto and try to claw at him behind the gates, as Naruto would jump back, barely being able to dodge the attack by Kurama. And for the next months, Naruto would often find himself in his mindscape, talking with Kurama about his problems and asking Kurama questions like he usually does. This day, Kurama would actually respond, telling him why he isn't terrified and why he wants to talk to him. Naruto would remain silent for a second, before finally saying, "Because you're the only one who can't walk away. You're the only person who, even though ignores me, I can actually talk to," stating that even though he hates him, he's glad he's here, and that he understands how Kurama feels, saying that he's probably just misunderstood. He doesn't seem like a demon to him, and he's just angry and frustrated, saying he could relate just as much as he can, saying that they're the same. They're both hated by the people of the village, and Naruto would say that he's the only one who could relate to him, leaving Kurama dumbfounded by these words. Naruto would remain in silence before asking if he was always hated, and Kurama would chuckle after a bit of silence before finally talking to Naruto, explaining that it wasn't always this way, talking to Naruto for a few minutes. Eventually, they began talking every day, and Kurama began not hating the notion of actually having Naruto visit him, slowly stopping his interference with Naruto's chakra control, making it easy for Naruto to get a better grasp of these things, which would help Naruto a lot in the long run, and he would rapidly begin learning scroll after scroll from Hiruzen, eventually mastering all of the scrolls he had to offer and learning the basics of adamantium chain technique used by his mother. As time progressed, Naruto would find himself dead last because Mizuki, every time that Naruto would take a test, would pretty much sabotage Naruto. So the only thing that he was ever good at was the physical portion of exams and things like that, which was what kept him barely afloat. He was always dead last, and he began showing everybody with his physical prowess that he wasn't as useless as everyone thinks, that even though he might not be the smartest, he has great taijutsu skills. Eventually though, the day of the graduation would arrive, and Naruto, as expected, would fail. He would end up being told by Mizuki that there's actually another way to pass, and Naruto would blindly do what was asked of him, eventually leading to Canon's events playing out just like they would have in Canon, remaining the same up until the point where Naruto even gets on his squad, Team 7, to the point where he introduces himself, saying that his name is Naruto Uzumaki. He loves ramen, training, and books, and he dislikes people who are quick to judge him, leaving Sakura to wonder about Naruto. She doesn't like him, but he never bothers her like in Canon, so she doesn't quite hate him. He would wonder if she was too quick to judge him off the bat, thinking that maybe she'll try being nice for once. Sasuke does his usual thing, and the team would meet at the training ground the next day, where the only significant event to happen would be that Naruto's skills as a ninja and fighting capability would actually be on par of a Chunin level, and his jutsus would even be powerful as well, also displaying his ability to use adamantium chains on Kakashi, holding him still for an instant before Kakashi used the substitution jutsu and got out of that situation, seeing as he had 2 free hands, as well as using seals to increase his speed and increase the gravity on himself, kind of like Rock Lee, where by taking them off, he gets even faster. So this would be a significant change in the way that he shows that he's the strongest, and he's still unable to get the bells. So the team would still inevitably fail, and they would end up passing just like they do in Canon after they end up offering food to one another. This is where things actually begin to change for our protagonist, since now we get into mission territory. After 2 weeks worth of use as missions, we cut to the fight between Zabuza and Kakashi, which follows the main timeline of events. Actually, wait, Naruto would help Sasuke with the Demon Brothers, but other than that, everything else kinda goes the same, seeing as Naruto being an Uzumaki doesn't exactly change much until we really get to Shippuden. That said, this is why I'm going to be kind of speed blitzing through these events. So, what ends up happening is essentially the fight goes eerily similar to the one in Canon, except to free Kakashi, Naruto's actually the one who does this, using his Uzumaki chain jutsu to catch Zabuza off guard and capture him, displaying his prowess in the jutsu and being able to actually free Kakashi, giving him enough time to recover and then ultimately off Zabuza, who couldn't do anything but await his face. Watching close by would be a helpless Haku, who even watching this would know that his speed wouldn't be enough to be able to help save Zabuza. So he would have to watch Zabuza die right in front of him. And after this, he would be filled with so much bloodlust, as Kakashi would attempt to fight against Haku, getting trapped in the Ice Crystal Mirror Jutsu, as the team would simply watch as they see Kakashi get decimated, almost dying, leading to Naruto's eventual dope rage moment that causes him to speed blitz Haku and beat the life out of him, leading to a barely clinging onto life Kakashi living. The team would then end up taking Kakashi home, and they would eventually end up getting the dub on Gato's men, as well as Zabuza and Haku, earlier than in Canon. This leaves to Team 7 not training with Kakashi, seeing as he's injured this time, and instead Naruto's the one to teach them a couple of jutsu, with Sasuke establishing a very one-sided rivalry with Naruto, and Naruto thanking Kurama for his help, that if it wasn't for him, Naruto might have hurt his own teammates during that encounter. Cutting back to after Naruto killed Haku, we see him turn his team and rush Sakura before falling unconscious and passing out in front of a ready Sasuke who had a kunai in his hand, who was in fear of Naruto. and Kurama tells him that he won't be helping again, as he turns away and Naruto would smile. After this, eventually, Kakashi would end up healing just enough for the team to return to Konoha, as they would, and Kakashi would end up informing Hiruzen of Naruto's adept, skills as an Uzumaki, saying that he's quite similar to his mother Kushina, with Hiruzen saying that he's actually the spitting image, saying that he took after Minato in the sense that he's a genius, kind of like him. And Kakashi would nod before asking Hiruzen if it would be okay if he signed them up for the Chunin exams. Hiruzen would nod and tell him that he sees no reason for him not to, and so Team 7 would be enlisted into the Chunin exams, which we're going to be cutting into, immediately just blitzing by the fact that Sasuke gets his back blown out by Rock Lee, and the team would pass the written test, because let's be honest here, that part's pretty boring. We cut to them being in the Forest of Death, specifically when Naruto's out taking a leak. This man Naruto would whip out his schlong, his massive, gigantic hand would zip up his pants, and from here he would just begin walking towards his team again, right? As this is happening, we cut to a gigantic snake rushing at Naruto's direction. Naruto would be quick to perceive this, sensing it, and jump on top of one of the trees so that the snake wouldn't be able to eat him whole. Naruto from here would jump down to the ground before he would then say, "Jesus, I can't believe this giant thing came after me," before weaving a couple of hand signs, and a bunch of chakra trains would restrain the gigantic snake in front of him. Naruto, using this opportunity, would open one of the scrolls that he had handy and take out a blade, as he would come down with it and slice the snake's head clean off, as he lands on the ground and would then scoff at the notion that a gigantic snake really tried to attack him. He begins trying to make his way back towards his teammate, and this is when the encounter with Orochimaru would happen. Now, I wish I could tell you guys that Naruto, being an Uzumaki, having these cool new jutsus, is going to do something against Orochimaru, but to be realistic with you guys, it's not. Naruto still does end up having his awesome moment against Orochimaru when he does use the power of the Nine Tails, but Orochimaru would use a tetragram seal to actually end up sealing the Nine Tails' abilities so that Naruto would get knocked out and Sakura would still end up being faced with the Sound Genin, who would inevitably end up being saved by the rest of the rookies such as Rock Lee and Ino, Shikamaru, and Choji. Eventually, they would make their way towards the tower, and Sasuke would have his curse mark sealed by Kakashi himself, and he would go on to have his usual match with his normal opponent. The only real change that happens on this specific day is Naruto's battle against Akamaru and Kiba. The way that I see this all going down is essentially a more overpowered Naruto, who is more physically faster and stronger than Kiba, is able to quickly outpace and outclass his opponent in every shape, way, and form. Kiba at first is able to actually do something with his, little beast transformation ability, but inevitably once Naruto gets the hang of that ability, he's able to quickly create a bunch of clones that would rush in and begin to essentially just jump Kiba and Akamaru. That's as plain and simple as I can summarize it. Eventually, Hinata would still end up getting beaten up by Neji, and Naruto would still end up swearing to defeat Neji when they fight in the finals. Neji scoffs at this, and from here, what ends up going down is essentially everybody would be given 1 month to train. Sasuke still takes his time to meet up with Kakashi and do that, and Naruto would still end up using this time to train alongside Jiraiya, except this time since he has way better chakra control and able to actually access the Nine Tails chakra just a little bit because Kurama doesn't exactly hate him, he's able to actually summon Gamabunta a lot earlier than he does in canon. And when Jiraiya sees this, he's utterly shocked at Naruto's performance. It only took him 1 day to summon Gamabunta? That's a feat that he's never seen before. The original Naruto, I'm pretty sure, took about 2 weeks to be able to do that. And he started off with a tadpole. Naruto didn't start off with that. He started off with a very large summoning in it itself. And the reason that Naruto was able to do this is because seals and summonings and things like that are right up his alley. That said, he's able to quickly perform jutsu such as this, and after learning this, Jiraiya would actually end up teasing to him that for the next following days or weeks, he's going to be learning one jutsu, or at least trying to, as he would end up showing off the Rasengan to Naruto way earlier than he does in canon, which does end up coming in handy because this version of Naruto was able to master the Rasengan in a week time, leaving Naruto about 3 days to try to work on controlling the power of the Kyuubi, which actually comes a lot easier to him due to the fact that now he's full-blooded Uzumaki and his chakra pools are even more massive than in the original. I know that normal Naruto has chakra 20 times larger than Kakashi's, but this time it's 30 times larger. So yeah, pretty big difference due to the fact that he's actually full Uzumaki. That said, in case you guys are wondering if Minato was still known as the Yellow Flash, sadly not. He was known as the Red Flash of the Hidden Leaf because, you know, his hair's red. That said though, eventually the battle between Naruto and Neji would end up going down, and I see no real reason for the beginning to change. Naruto's not going to be able to close in on Neji because of Neji's ability to actually use the spinning jutsu that dodges every attack that comes his way. Naruto is going to be very shocked at the fact that Neji has access to something as powerful and potent as this, and it's honestly just going to be a very good thing that he's able to just whip out in a moment's notice. That said though, what would end up happening is essentially Naruto was able to eventually get close once Neji's chakra begins running out, and after Neji eventually ends up hitting him with the 64 palm, Naruto was able to reactivate his chakra using the abilities of the Nine Tails, going on to display his chakra change, causing Neji to get restrained and then rushing him with a Rasengan point blank to his stomach. That would send Neji flying back just a bit because he is restrained and ultimately knock Neji out. It would be a pretty badass win in my book, and following these events, what would end up happening is the Sasuke versus Gaara fight. Now what ends up happening from here is essentially eerily very similar to canon, just due to the fact that Naruto still ends up having to go save Sasuke, Hiruzen still dies, Orochimaru gets away, his arms get sealed, the situation in Konoha remains the same, and Naruto was able to essentially still end up bringing Gaara to the light side by using Tak no Jutsu. So there's no real reason to cover any of that stuff. But the next arc is actually going to be having a slight better reason to actually cover it. Naruto is inevitably going to end up going off to find Tsunade with Jiraiya. And when they do so, what ends up essentially happening is the encounter with Itachi and Kisame goes the same due to the fact that I get it, yeah, Naruto has access to a couple more jutsus than he does in canon, but he still is going to be needing the assistance of Jiraiya to end up, causing Itachi and Kisame to run away, as well as Sasuke coming in and getting pretty much just GG'd by his big brother. The only real change that happens in this arc is essentially Naruto is able to bait Tsunade into the Rasengan ploy, and he's actually able to use it the first day. She says, I bet you couldn't master the Rasengan in a week. And Naruto would say, oh, you want to bet? She would say, yeah, I'll bet. And Naruto would activate the Rasengan in front of her, leading to her iconic name, the legendary loser, remaining true. That said though, this, like I said, is where more of the crazier events are actually going to begin happening. Naruto this time around, when he ends up actually going after Sasuke and for the Sasuke retrieval mission this time around, is actually able to drag Sasuke back by breaking every bone in his body! Just like you guys would probably expect, because this time around Naruto has better control over the Kyuubi's chakra, and instead of one tail is actually able to access two tails. Not only that, but this time around Naruto was not playing no games. He summoned Gamabunta, and Sasuke was pretty much screwed after that. With Naruto having a better understanding of the Rasengan this time around, because he doesn't have his blockage of chakra from Kurama, having access to a plethora more jutsus, and his chakra chains, he's able to restrain Sasuke long enough for Kakashi to arrive to end up taking back a drain Naruto and wear Sasuke back to the village, where Sasuke would be pretty much restrained and kind of interrogated by the Anbu members and stuff like that. Tsunade would still end up inevitably healing both of them, and what would end up happening from here is the 3-year time skip. During this 3-year time skip, a couple of events are actually going to be changing heavily. During this 3-year time skip, instead of just doing random missions around the world, Naruto would request about Jiraiya to know about his lineage, who were his parents, and after asking about it for a year, Jiraiya would finally tell him the truth. Minato Namikaze and Kushina Uzumaki. Minato Uzumaki and Kushina Uzumaki. Okay, sorry about that. Naruto hearing this would be like, they're my parents? And Jiraiya would say that it's actually kind of shocking how he didn't notice after all this time. I mean, the resemblance is uncanny. Strange how Naruto was unable to acknowledge something as simple as this. Naruto would kind of be like, what do you mean something as simple as this? This isn't simple. But inevitably, what would end up essentially happening is Naruto would end up taking these 3-year time skip to actually go and explore the land of the whirlpool, finding more secrets about himself, more secrets about his clan, and honestly wanting to, after, seeing the state of the land of the whirlpools, wanting to bring his village back. So Naruto's going to be going into the clan resurrection pack thingy-majigger, where he's actually going to be having access to tons of women. And cause why not? Come on now, why not? I'm gonna be taking a page out of Anime Sage's book. So yeah. Anyways though, what ends up happening after this is actually going to be pretty interesting, because Naruto now is going to have a bit of a change in appearance. I know the Naruto in the thumbnail looks like the normal Naruto that we see in Shippuden, but the one that ends up returning back to the village actually looks eerily similar to that of Minato Uzumaki, and with his trademark red hair and blue eyes, would have actually ended up changing his cut a little bit and doesn't have the same drip that he does in canon. He actually has something way saucier than an orange jumpsuit. It's a full-on, just dope black hoodie that he would have worn in Naruto the Last, and the rest of the outfit is kind of the same, just some normal shinobi pants and shoes. That said, these aren't actually the only developments that end up happening in the series. The other thing that ends up changing during this 3-year time skip is the fact that Naruto this time around, having known his father and mother, with Jiraiya explaining to him the fact that the Rasengan is an incomplete jutsu, Naruto would have actually ended up developing the Rasen Shuriken earlier than he did in canon, as well as mastering the flying Raijin technique from his father, because he wanted to honor his father in a way. So now Naruto is going to be known pretty soon as the Red Flash of the Hidden Leaf Village. That said though, it's going to be kind of interesting how everything is going to be happening now, because this is where more of the territory is just kind of going to become, how do I explain it? This kind of mesh between a little bit of changes and almost no changes at all. The first thing that we're going to be covering is honestly going to be no changes, which is going to basically make up most of Naruto returning to the village, having his encounter with Tsunade, and the bell test alongside Sakura and Kakashi. This time around, Naruto was able to display the flying Raijin, catching Kakashi off guard and making him be extremely proud of his student, thinking back to what Minato was like and saying that if Minato was alive, he would be so proud of him. Naruto would be pretty happy, and this is when Sasuke would reveal himself, and Naruto and Sasuke would end up kind of like dapping each other up, being like, how you been for these 3 years? Sasuke would say, I've been better, and from here he would go on to explain to Naruto that he definitely surpassed him now. Naruto would chuckle, stating that he wants to see him try to beat him, and from here, this is when they would get an alert to actually report to Tsunade-sama. When they would do so, they would end up making their way to the tower, and she would inform them about the hidden sand village actually being attached by 2 Akatsuki members, Deidara and Sasori. Immediately after knowing this, they would be told about the fact that they need to go find out what happened to the Kazekage, and they would end up embarking on the mission. The change this time around is going to be that Sasuke is actually included. Nothing really changes, including Lady Chiyo attacking Kakashi, thinking that he's the White Fang, and genuinely nothing really changes from this point on, until they end up arriving at the actual Akatsuki hideout. This is where things slightly begin to deviate off of the normal event, because this time around, Kakashi actually stays behind to help Sakura deal with that of Sasori. So we have Kakashi, we have Sakura, and Lady Chiyo. So the battle overall just ends up becoming a lot more easier, and with Kakashi, showing off his Kamui ability, it becomes a lot more easier to take out Sasori than it was in canon. When it comes to Naruto and Sasuke, they're the ones who end up chasing after Deidara, and I'm happy to announce that this time, Deidara doesn't end up going off and fighting Sasuke, because this time, he dies here and now. Naruto and Sasuke would encounter Deidara, and at first the battle would be kind of tricky for Deidara, seeing as he's fighting 2 of the most powerful ninjas in the series at the moment. Naruto, using his flying Raijin technique, would actually catch Deidara off guard, sending him crashing to the ground with Rasengan. Deidara would immediately threaten to explode himself and this entire area, including all of their comrades, because it reaches that, vicinity. And they would be quite scared of this outcome. But what Sasuke would end up doing is essentially, how do I put this? Like attacking Deidara before he even has the chance to even use that. And the way that he does that is by lifting one hand up and dropping it down to the ground, causing a gigantic lightning dragon to just smite Deidara. It just destroys him. And Naruto, watching this move like close by, is like, Sasuke, you gotta teach me that move. Sasuke would smile, telling Naruto that maybe he is a little stronger. Now he'll admit it, and Naruto would say, oh no, way, you're not even close. Sasuke would kind of scoff at this, and from here they would go on to save Deidara, after Lady Chiho sacrifices her life, that is. When they end up returning to the village, Asuma's death would be announced, and Jiraiya would have already pretty much left to go find Pain. He would still end up dying just like he does in canon, and Naruto and Sasuke would end up both essentially going off to assist, how do I put this? They would end up going off to assist Asuma and in his little endeavor with the Akatsuki. That still ends up going down just like it does in canon, and following those events, what ends up happening essentially is when Sasuke would end up getting his letter from his big brother Itachi, he's able to actually get into contact with Naruto and ask him to come along with him, just in case things go sideways. Naruto would agree to this, and from here they would both end up reporting to the area where Itachi ended up requesting Sasuke to meet him at. They wouldn't have told Lady Tsunade just due to the fact that she probably would not have been all for this idea, thinking that it most likely would have been a trap, but Naruto and Sasuke, they're with it. You know, they want all the smoke from Itachi, so they don't really care. Also, quick thing, water break. Okay, that hits different. Especially when you've been talking for so long. I can't tell you guys how good a drink of water hits. Okay, anyways though, getting back into the story, Naruto and Sasuke would arrive, and just like usual, Kisame would actually be there alongside Itachi. So this actually would end up leading to a battle between Naruto versus Kisame and Sasuke versus Itachi. Now, I'm going to genuinely just spare you guys the details because the Naruto versus Kisame battle is really the only interesting thing. Sasuke versus Itachi essentially goes down just like it does in canon until the very end when Itachi taps his forehead. But we'll get to that after the Naruto versus Kisame battle. So now we know that Naruto was essentially a seal master. As soon as he encounters Kisame, he begins fighting him. A sword clash of sorts. They begin getting into it, and immediately Naruto was able to know that Kisame is just going to outclass him if he plays his little game. So Naruto beginning to be outsped and actually strength, he would end up removing the seals on his body, causing his speed to greatly increase, and this would actually catch Kisame off guard. This is when the battle would become more, interesting. And Naruto, using a kunai, or two kunai, sorry, would end up kind of beginning to slightly dodge out of the way of Kisame's attack, jumping backwards before saying, "Wind style, wind bullet jutsu!" shooting a gigantic wind bullet at the direction of Kisame, who would end up just dodging out of the way and then rushing in at Naruto to thrust at him with his sword. Naruto's able to dodge in an ultra instinct fashion before teleporting behind Kisame as he would say, "You're too slow," and he would create a Rasen Shuriken in one hand as a clone above him disperses, and he would end up smashing the Rasen Shuriken square into Kisame, which would send him flying back and actually damage him considerably, like a huge amount. I'm not sure if the Rasen Shuriken would have actually ended up taking down Kisame at this point, because I know it took down Kakazu and he's like immortal or whatever, but I'm not sure if Kisame has more durability. But just due to the fact that he hasn't merged with Samehada, so his durability probably isn't that high, I'm just going to be saying that the Rasen Shuriken is able to one-hit KO him. After this happens, the battle between Sasuke and Itachi would have been getting to its climax, and Sasuke would end up bringing down his Raikiri. No, not Raikiri, but Kirin. As this is happening, Naruto would get to the scene and Sasuke would end up pretty much passing out unconscious. This is when Obito, like in canon, usually would step in and take Sasuke away, but Naruto, seeing this, would end up rushing in to stand before him. Obito would rush in at Naruto before promptly dismantling him easily and holding on to Sasuke. He begins telling him that he was a bit too late, and Naruto would say, "Was I?" as he would use his flying Raijin marker to grab onto Sasuke and then teleport back to the village, where Obito was left just kind of angry at the fact that he let that happen. Sasuke this time doesn't end up being told about the secret of the Hidden Leaf Village, and by the way, this version of Sasuke, ends up unlocking his Mangekyo after talking to his brother and, kind of being told that he still loves him. Sasuke just feeling such strong emotions unlocks it then instead of when he usually does in canon. So that's kind of going to be a little bit of a bonus, but Itachi's body stayed behind. So Obito still does end up having those 2 eyes that Sasuke should have been given. But I digress. Obito is just hopeful that he'll be able to encounter Sasuke soon enough. And what ends up happening following these events is, well, Naruto and Sasuke being back in the Hidden Leaf Village. Their return to the Hidden Leaf Village would be a good one because they barely end up arriving back into the village around the time when Pain was going to attack, the next day. They're just doing their usual activities and Pain would end up using the almighty push. This time what ends up happening is Sasuke and Naruto were both able to handle the Pain clones, and Sasuke and Naruto both combined would actually have it a lot of an easier time facing the Diva Path and all the other, 6 paths of Pain. This would create a lot more ease and less tension in the battle, and Naruto would be able to actively play a bigger role in this battle, using his Uzumaki chains to actually hold the Diva Path in place before throwing a Rasen Shuriken at him. That's right, throwing, like a dart, just throwing it straight at him, and it would just pretty much destroy the Diva Path. That's as plain as I can put it. It was between the 5-second cooldown, destroying him. Following that, they end up following the rods back, and the not the Shinra Tensei, but the Rinne Rebirth Jutsu would still be casted, and this would lead to essentially everybody being back. Tsunade would still be replaced as Kage by Danzo, and the Kage Summit would end up happening just like it does in the original. This time around, events slightly begin to deviate due to the fact that Naruto and Sasuke are both going to kind of end up going there alongside Team 7 just like they would have in the original, and Danzo would bring some random shinobi to be his guard. I genuinely forget who exactly it was, but when they're there and Obito arrives, he ends up pretty much informing everybody about the 4th Great Shinobi War. And following this, he would end up actually informing Sasuke of the fact that the village was the one who ordered Itachi to slaughter the Uchiha clan, telling him that if he goes with him, that he'll tell him everything he wants to know. And Sasuke would end up going off with Obito, then hearing about everything that essentially happened to his clan, being given the Eternal Mangekyo Sharingan, and just leaving Naruto to wonder why Sasuke would have chose to go with him, but also understanding the fact that Sasuke wanted answers and this was the only way he was going to get them. So Naruto would sigh before thinking to himself that hopefully Sasuke is able to, protect himself and deal with himself as good as he hopes. Naruto would end up returning back to the village where everybody begins regrouping, and then the 4th Great Shinobi World War ends up happening, much like many of you guys would probably expect. I'd love to tell you guys that Naruto having Uzumaki chains and like all this other stuff ends up making it easier, but we have to keep in mind the fact that this Naruto didn't exactly give himself the chance to learn Sage Mode. So what ends up happening is essentially he has a way harder time facing, everybody in these normal battles than he does in canon. He still ends up talking to Kurama, and everything essentially goes a lot more difficult than it would have in the original in terms of the final war, up until when Naruto was given the 6th path Sage Mode powers by Hagoromo Otsutsuki. Once this happens, that gap of not having Sage Mode would be replaced by the fact that now he has 6th path Sage Mode, and he's able to actually do decent damage to Madara, actually stopping things before Madara is able to actually turn into Kaguya. Sasuke being there would be like, sorry, I'm late. And then, essentially he ends up stopping Black Zetsu from killing Madara, leading to a really badass dope battle between Madara versus Sasuke and Naruto. How would this battle play out? I really don't know, because Kishimoto stated that Madara, I remember watching an interview where Kishimoto was basically saying, like, everybody has their weaknesses, you know what I mean? But not Madara. So Kishimoto clearly loves Madara. I do too, I get it. Madara is a Giga Chad. So I'm genuinely unsure because it was never stated whether they would easily defeat him or not. And Naruto's speed is already comparable to that of a flying Raijin technique anyways. So I really don't understand what exactly I could cover here. Like, yeah, the battle would be awesome, but I genuinely don't know what way it would go. I guess I'm just kind of going to leave it up to you guys. You guys are going to be the ones to decide how this battle ends. So I'm just gonna leave it off here. Did you enjoy What If Naruto was an Uzumaki? Did you not? Did you find that it was boring? Let me know what I can change down below in my writing later, and also let me know what your favorite part of the video was. If you enjoyed any part of this, make sure to slap that like button, and also go to Izukage's channel and tell him to come back. This man said he was coming back like a week ago and he still hasn't. So please do me a favor and help me bring this man back from the grave. Anyways though, I love each and every single one of you guys. It has been your boy Zether, and I am out. Peace.